Okay, so Karol Dillon, welcome back onto the show. You finished your PhD research in the subject of bilaterality in Gaelic football. So since we've last spoke, you've it's been what, about 12 months, I think. So you've managed to get that over the line. What's it been like, first of all, to finish up, and you're officially a doctor now?
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, I've put in, I suppose, 5 years between the master's thesis on it and 4 and a bit years on the PhD. So it was 5 years of my life. Um, there's a lot gone into it, I suppose, and just relief, happy. Um, yeah, it was a nice day to get the whole final examination sorted and gone over the line and move on now. There's more things to be examined and research, but yeah, no, the last 12 months have been interesting for sure. But relieved.
So when we last spoke, like, I think the conversation probably hinged on just the topic of developing two-sided players in Gaelic football, and like we would have spoken a lot about different individuals, Shane Walsh, David Clifford, even guys like Tomas O'Shea and Tom O'Sullivan who would solo cross lattery and all that stuff. We really delved into that side of things. Um, and you would have given your opinion as well on sort of how to develop that skill, and how rare it probably is in Gaelic football. And you had a lot of research done on um, different counties across the divisions and how rare it is that a player can actually even use both hands equally. Um, Over the last year, then, like since finishing your work, has anything or has your thoughts on the subject changed over the past year? Has it made you rethink anything since you finished that PhD?
Look, when we last spoke, and I suppose the reception from people talking informally was, I think they were really, really, I suppose, transfixed by cross-laterality, the David Cliffords of the world, or Tom Sullivan of the world with the left foot, right hand. And then they inevitably ask, were their sons or daughters cross-lateral? And, but I felt that there's always a lag when you do these kind of pieces versus what's due to come out in the research, where what you're allowed to talk about. And I suppose there's a few different things in the last 12 months. The survey where we surveyed male and female development squad players around the country, just under 400, their attitudes to it and their developmental aspects to their laterality and their attitudes to that non-dominant hand, non-dominant foot, and what they felt was the most effective. And one of the things I'd like to communicate today is even teenage boys and girls at the football squad level felt that the games-based approach was the most effective way to develop a non-dominant hand and foot. And the other thing it says, the role of parents in those surveys, what those kids communicated in the surveys because their role of parents was really important. Probably a lot of consistency across the club and development squads, and also from development squad year to development squad year. Would be in terms of my overall thinking in the matter is beyond that is I- I've been fortunate enough to go around to clubs and I suppose counties in the last 12 months and give talks and um, informal talk, even informal talks that I would have people would contact me for advice. And there has been a couple of outliers on a positive sense. I would like to name Check Park and has been incredibly positive and how they're going about things and really impressed by it. But on the other hand, I'm kind of surprised, not surprised, I don't know if it's the word, but there's still maybe missing the point is what I would say. Uh, Missing the point, the complexity of this. Uh, Firstly, how complicated it is in terms of this is a skill by skill basis. Like if we go back to Tom Sullivan and ignore the cross laterality, I mean, do people know he's right hand dominant for his hop? Or sorry, he's left hand dominant for the hop. He's right hand dominant for the hand pass. Right foot's dominant for the solo. Left foot dominant for the kick pass. How many of their own kids at club and development squad level are they aware of players like that? Where they see a kid and he or she is kicking with the right foot and they assume they're right side dominant for all skills. And Palm, by the way, is quite, yeah. So, the complexity of it. And then the other thing, which I suppose is coaches are constantly looking for something concrete, whereby if we do this for 3 or 4 months, Carl, can you give us a percentage improvement? And I would love to be able to do that. I would love to be able to say, like an S&C program, um, if you do X, you will improve by 24%. That simply doesn't exist in skill acquisition, especially it doesn't exist in the development of non-diamond side. I would say, like, we need to look at this like diet. The development of non-diamond side needs to be seen as a lifestyle. It's your life. You have to do it every day, or otherwise it won't. And I would challenge coaches to see it like that, and to say, okay, if I do it at under 14 level, would my club? The chances are they won't see the benefit until they get to minor, whereby it's another coach entirely who's over them.
Mm.
But that's the challenge, and that's what you're trying to. Maybe I'm a bit naive in the sense of going in thinking, okay, if I communicate X, Y, and Z, and if I'm going to be able to convince them. But actually, what I'm beginning to realize now is you're just trying to sow a seed. Uh, Trying to sow a seed and maybe start a discussion. Because I would challenge everyone. The one thing I would be quite definitive on is this: what we're currently doing in general, and there are exceptions, but what we're currently doing is not working. Uh, and again, I know, like, I spoke about Shane Walsh. Shane Walsh is not evidence of anything. Shane Walsh is Shane Walsh. Like, he's a very talented player, obviously obsessive work rate, and had very positive influences on his childhood. And Shane is objectively the most bilateral player in Ireland, but with hands in his feet. Okay.
Mm.
But in general, players are unilateral, i.e., one sided.
Mm.
Division 1 to Division 4, male, female. And it is a myth to say that Division 1 players are bilateral. You go and we look at the Dublin game on Sunday. I mean, using this because it was 3 days ago. And Dublin were excellent. I thought they were full value. The amount of times, and this is not just Dublin, this is all counties. If you're in Cork Park and you're the lowest end, and a team is playing from right to left, they're playing into the Hill 16. How many times do you see the wing forward or the midfielder coming down to hit the open stand side in acres of space, and he turns back inside?
Mm.
And you're talking about efficiency, and you're talking about the role of efficiency in conditioning. It's akin to rugby, whereby you're bringing it up, you're banging it up the little 20 phases, the hundreds, and there's a winger in 20 yards of space. If they can just get the ball out there, it's not efficient. So that's trying to communicate all of that stuff to that it's a lifestyle, it's long term, and this is affecting you more than you realize.
Yeah. So you were saying then, so after we last chatted, I suppose you were asked to go around to a lot of different clubs and counties, and there would have been coaches reaching out to you. What was the biggest sort of misconception that they had? It was that thing around it's a quick fix. It's a 3 month thing. We can implement these drills, and then in X amount of time, then the players will kind of improve. And they didn't understand that it needs to be almost a top down approach in the club or in a county where this is how we do things, and we're not necessarily saying that by under 12, under 14, it's going to happen. But by the time they get to minor or even senior level, it's going to have an impact.
The term I would say, I think we use this in the thesis, but functional adaptability.
Mm.
And by functional adaptability is that we're not looking for a player to be 50-50 on each skill. Functional adaptability would be your ability to use the appropriate side in the appropriate situation. Even if you're kicking the ball 80% of the time off your dominant foot, that you were able to use your non-dominant foot according to the side that the defender is coming from. And maybe that's what we need to communicate as well to the coaches, that it isn't 50-50. But what I would say is that, yeah, even you would get emails and you would get phone calls, sorry, and coaches would say, Jesus, I heard you in Humans of Gaelic Football there. It was really enjoyable. Do you have any tips? Or I've come across some of your stuff online. Do you, would you be available for a phone call? Nice. The people are very nice. Don't get me wrong, but
Mm.
I'm like, what am I expected to do here, you know? And I was like, this is 5 years of work. I want to be to uh, dilute it or condense it into a 15-minute conversation.
Mm.
And
Mm.
would you? Okay, I'll change the conversation a little bit. If you were an S&C practitioner, would you ring up an S&C practitioner and say, we want to change S&C within the club? Would you be able to give us a 10-minute call here?
Yeah, like it's very hard to do, and you don't know the individuals or what they actually need and where they're at the moment. But that does happen as well.
Really?
Yeah. I'm
Wow.
not in that exact instance, but people would be going, what's the best drill for this, or what's the best exercise I can do here, where it's not actually, there's not one thing that you will do that will sort of change everything. Like even players will ask, how can I improve my 2 point shooting? What exercise should I do in the gym? But there's a whole range of things that you can do, and even the best thing you can do is probably just improve your striking of the ball. That's
Yeah.
probably the most effective things. So, but people are just going back to that. People are just always looking for probably the quick fix. And like I find coaches are always interested, and as a coach myself, and I know you coach as well, you're always on the lookout for different things, different drills that you can take and that you can bring to yourself. But this topic is probably so complex that people don't even realize how complex it is. The one thing I always remember from our last conversation was you were talking about a way to develop your weaker side is brush your teeth with your weaker hand, with your non-dominant hand. So that goes back to that whole lifestyle thing where it can't just be 3 times a week on a pitch we're doing these drills. It has to be every day, even in your day-to-day life you're working on.
I often say to coaches or, excuse me, to clubs or companies that bring me in um, for a chat. I say to them, if it's a choice between bringing me down here for a talk or buying with the O'Neill's trainers football, which are 25 years ago, for the love of God, will you buy the football
Mm.
and make sure that every kid has a football going home? Because 10 minutes at the end of a session in the non-dominant side will not cut it. As I say, this is lifestyle. This is informal touches throughout the day. Breaking windows, breaking lights, which every kid should do enough, in my view,
Mm.
in terms of skill development. Brushing teeth, PlayStation, believe it or not, being with the non-dominant hand, it is all about body awareness and limb awareness, because there's cognition here, and there's a lot of complicated issues going on. And the more you use your non-dominant hand throughout the day, or the non-dominant foot, the less of a shock to the system, for want of a better word, is going to be. So
Yeah.
it is, as I say, I wouldn't communicate that it's just, it has to be a lifestyle, a long-term thing. And there isn't, we did research, was there a sensitive spot? Are you more likely to develop your non-dominant side if you practice being the ages of 14 to 16 I would say. We didn't find any evidence that there's a sensitive spot or a sweet spot, but it does come down to skill repetitions. If you've executed 50,000 skill executions on your dominant foot by the time you're 18, and you literally start by the time you're 18 in the non-dominant foot, that's a big gap to make up.
Mm.
And we have to look at it mathematically like that. If you've executed it 100,000 times off your dominant foot by the time you're 18, how do you expect to be anyway proficient if there's such a discrepancy between the two numbers?
Mm. Talk to me about the PhD. Like we were chatting, say, last week as we were preparing for this, and you mentioned your intervention and the fact that it maybe didn't work, and that just go into the detail on that a bit, because I thought that was interesting. What did the data actually show you from the intervention, and what did that actually involve?
Yeah, so it was 3 months and 3 days a week home practice. And then I was present for the development squad, and I was present on Saturdays, and the training session occurred as normal, but I would intervene broke the session with my 6 lads and told them they should have used their non-dominant side in one particular situation. So I was intervening live.
Mm.
So I had full autonomy to work with those 6 lads throughout that session. And what we did then which was experimenting with new ways of developing it. We used AirPods, which I feel are very, very practical for any kid or parent. Uh, is we don't want a situation where we tell Kevin to go off and hit the ball off the wall 50 times off any Dominic. So what I used to do is record 150 skill executions, random, and WhatsApp them to the coach who used to WhatsApp to the parent. They plug in their AirPods. And while they're kicking the ball off the side of the wall, it would be, they didn't know what skill was coming next.
Okay.
That has to mirror as much as possible, as is possible in an isolated practice situation, the randomness of a game situation. So they don't know what side the defender's coming for. They don't necessarily know what skill they're going to use next. So when they're executing the right hand top off the wall, they don't know that the left hand pass is the next. What we found was that all the players find that their confidence and awareness went up over the course of the trainings. It generally found the AirPods most effective versus block practice at the start. But the frequency which they use on dominant side didn't decrease or
Mm.
change. Am I surprised by that? No, considering how what we had learned in the previous 3 to 4 years. But it just again underlines how this is incredibly long. It has to be a long-term process.
Yeah, that's interesting because I would have thought that if a player says they feel more confident using that side, then in a game they're more likely to pull out that skill or use that side when they need to. So is it down to it's almost an instinctive reaction that in a split second moment in a game they're always going to be more leaning towards still the dominant side, even though they do feel more confident using their non-dominant foot?
And that's your 1% right here. This goes beyond the PhD and research, I suppose, that we found in the first couple of years is they've done this in other sports. There is a body of research out there to say there is a ceiling for this. There's a ceiling effect as to how much it can be improved. By the way, Kevin, there's no doubt whatsoever that in a closed drill situation, this can be improved.
Mm.
Seriously, closed skill assessment. That it can be improved by 80% in the course of trainings. But unless that's brought over to a game situation, the value of that is negative.
Yeah,
So
but there's two different things then, the actual technical skill and then the chances of them using it in a game.
100%. But people keep asking me. That is one thing I actually have come around to thinking. People legitimately ask me how we can measure improvement here. And I'm thinking about this, and I was like, is it skill assessment? Is it this? Is it that? For me, it's frequency of use in a game. I mean, if a player is using it 0, their non-dominant foot for a particular skill 0, and it's going up slowly, well, then that's improvement. We can work on this success.
Mm.
But if it's 0, being at 0, well, then I don't care how much you're technically improving. It's also nailing guys, for all of a better word. You're nailing guys when they do something good, even if the result isn't good. And we did that a lot in the division as well. I didn't care if they non-dominant footing and it went up miles over or beside you. Didn't matter to me. It was about saying, I don't care about the end result. That was the right thing to do. That would come right if you stick with it.
Mm.
But it was also kind of saying, well, if you had used the non-dominant side there, that would have been more efficient. There was a goal on here. I suppose I was trying to educate coaches and players as well that this doesn't have just a consequence for you in possession. This is a consequence for the team.
Mm.
So if you're a midfielder, you're catching a ball and you're going to the midfielder, a very good player. He was constantly catching the ball, landing on his left foot and turning to his right. But I said, like, you've cut down half the pitch there straight away.
Mm.
Because it's not that you've looked up and decided that the 13 channel, he's right, was the most appropriate channel. you've gone to your right first. And it's like the cart before the horse.
Mm.
Ideally, you want to look at 13 and 15 and 16, which is the better path. So you're being dictated to by your dominant side. And if you look in proper, and this is, I suppose, this is the next area we're going to look at future research in this area. And the dominant side, the dominant foot, um, dictates an awful lot the side the pass goes to. So you'd say, what's the problem there? Well, if you've 8 middle 8 players and they're all right foot dominant, well, I think you'll be fairly maddening to put your sweeper over in 13.
Mm.
If you're keeping team the ball's playing no margins.
I used to play right half back, and I used to find, say, when there was a turnover in our attack and the ball broke down, as opposed to playing left half back, the chances of the ball and me actually, my man making a run, but the ball actually going to him was so much less
Yeah.
when I played on the right versus on the left. And on the left, you have to be switched on because the ball, more than likely, unless you're playing, there was one particular team that had, I think, 3 left footers in their defence.
Yeah.
And they were the only team where the ball was more likely to come to my side rather than the other side. So it is interesting.
Yeah, it is, because, and then if you're on the other side, the other wing back, you can cheat.
Yeah.
If you do anything about you, like, you can cheat and just mosey over. You can ignore the wing forward, and you can almost be over centre back because that's where the ball is more likely to go. Even coming over to your wing.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to, like, so when we kind of, I put out a couple of clips last year of our conversation, and the Indo Sport podcast picked up on one of them, and Joe Malloy asked Tomas O'Shea about the cross-lateral solo, and from memory, now I haven't listened to it recently, but I think O'Shea, like Joe kind of said to him about, it's sprint mechanics, you're switching, and you're running with opposite arm, opposite leg, and from memory, I thought O'Shea just kind of said it was just natural. He hadn't really thought about it. It was just something that he had done. I know you're coaching with Killarney Legion at the moment, and we would have spoken about James O'Donoghue, and
Yeah.
again, he's probably one of the best components of that as well.
Mm.
Have you spoken to any players that we would have mentioned, that even from talking to James, or any other Kerry players that we would have touched on? Have they given any thoughts on it themselves, or have they given any opinion on it, or how did those kind of conversations go?
But Ben Van Sullivan was another one we spoke to about it.
Yeah.
James and then Tomas. I was really funny because James is the only one who was stripped it off. I don't think the other two for conversations I've had with sat down at 11 years of age and decided this is the most consistent with radio mechanics. What Declan and Tomas said was they felt more powerful and faster. Running that way. Soloing that way. James Dim would have been, I don't think he was tapped down either, but at the same time, he did have an athletics background, and he was done sports science in UL initially. So I think he was able to amalgamate the two and decide, actually, not only does this feel both right, but it actually makes more sense. There's another thing I didn't hit on last year with that, is that, would you believe in it? One way to develop the non-dominant side would be cross midline exercises. So cross midline exercises would be, if you're stretching your right hand to left foot, left hand to right foot, and it's about building communication between the two hemispheres of the brain. So again, I'm not saying this. I've done it at 10 years of age and decided to develop the communication between the two hemispheres of the brain. But believe it or not, by default, they've actually improved their non-dominant side, or they've developed the messaging between their non-dominant side and dominant side.
So there's research to show that, is there?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So by feeding the ball from their right hand, their left foot, that's cross midline activities.
Okay. So you spoke as well about, when we were talking, you spoke about there's kind of a coherence problem maybe between, say, parents, schools, clubs, development squads. There's no consistency in how any of this stuff is coached. And like, again, we spoke about parents being the biggest influence of all. Parents are the ones that can most influence this because they probably have the most contact hours from a young age. But like, and again, I'm at risk of going back to, you're getting a phone call and the guy's saying to you, what can they do here? But like, what's your advice, or what sort of best practice do you think? What way should the GA change this sort of thing, how it's coached in terms of development squads and all that?
We need to sit down I don't want to say this because this is independent. Again, I'm Kerry man, but it is completely independent of Kerry. But if I was in charge of a county, head a GDA, um, I would just say, I mean, all brokers, stakeholders need to come into a room. Um, coaching officers from clubs, from schools, from development squads, and then even parents, representative of parents, and just sit down and say, this is where we are. It's not really working. We can bury our heads in the sand for the next 10, 12, 15 years and pretend it is working because it isn't working. Or do we go after it? And if we go after it, can we be more aggressive and don't go after it?
Mm.
And as I said, essentially before we're slave to the taught tradition in GA. We do things because our coaches were coached that way and our coaches were coached that way, especially when it comes to skill development and skill acquisition. Similar to me, I saw Evan Talty was in with Limerick Seniors last year as skill acquisition. He's titled skill acquisition. I think that's brilliant. But how many people looked at that with an air of suspicion?
Yeah.
Right? And it's unfortunate that that's where we are in the GA. That I don't believe that air of suspicion exists when it's a Kevin McBride. He's in Wicklow with Boers and he's head of S&C. But yeah, I find that strange. Or, Kevin Daisley, he lives in the army, but that guy from the store, he's a nutritionist for Kerry Seniors from the years. I don't believe that suspicion or exists when you see Kevin Beasley, nutritionist, Kerry Seniors.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
there seems that kind of suspicion when it comes to skill acquisition, which is nuts because it is a game or a sport involving a ball. And skill acquisition is, to me, it's an ad hoc, make it up as you go along. We almost get to an end result where we don't even know how we got there with certain players. And it's been left largely to the players to develop. So to answer your question, and then I would be everybody into me. I would make sure at a very basic level, every kid as much as possible has a Gaelic football, i.e. a training ball, not a soccer ball. Secondly, I would say we need a skill profile. How many kids are you aware within the club and they enter not the nursery F3 by under 11 the plan and with the parents, what are the excuse me, what are their dominant limbs for each skill? You can sell Johnny or Mary to use their name down to the right hand side for the hop if you don't know what their dominant side for the hop is.
Yeah. It's interesting talking about that, the suspicion. Like there's a story about Niamh Fitzpatrick. She was a sports psychologist, and Wexford in '96 were one of the first teams to bring in a sports psychologist. But Liam Griffin actually put her down as a physio because she
Really?
didn't. Yeah, because they didn't, from the outside, they didn't want people thinking there's something wrong with these lads' heads because they need a sports psychologist in to work with them. So she was actually down as a physio, and she was wearing
Right.
physio gear, and she was on the sideline on game day. But that just shows you in jail. Like now it's kind of, it's quite common now to have a performance coach or a sports psychologist, so it does change over time, but it probably does take a long period of time as well for people to actually recognize.
That's fascinating. But don't go to show actually, and that has changed with sports psychology. But if a couple of incidents last year, I mean, I would name check three people very positively. Um, Dr. Aidan O'Connell, he's with Cork GA. I think he's excellent. Jason McGann, he's with Kerry, and Keelan Neal. I dealt with those in Relay over the last few years, and I thought they'd be a breath of fresh air. When you're working with them, you're pushing open an open door. They want to soak up anything new that they think will help the
Yeah.
organizations they're attached to. Be it very easy. On the other hand, then I've spoken to people who literally, and I'm not putting words in their mouth, who said that they're very suspicious of academics in sports academics.
Mm.
Um, and that, you don't want to dismiss their opinion. That's their opinion. That's, I don't want to be sat and arguing with people because they have a different view than you, but you'd kind of be like, of the view, well, how do we improve so?
Mm.
where you're getting your, where I would challenge them is say, where are you getting your information from to develop your role? Because where do you think that information comes from?
Mm. So three of those people you mentioned there, like Jason McGatton, Aidan O'Connell, and Cian O'Neill, I'm pretty sure all three have a background in S&C and sports science. You don't have to divulge private conversations, but are they looking at it from an S&C point of view? Is there anything from an S&C perspective? And I'm asking this question selfishly as an S&C coach. Is there anything from an S&C point of view that we can do that would improve this as well in players?
Little tips like, um, you, okay, you have your weight training, but how can we bring in a ball into the gym?
Really?
Yeah. Uh, it's trying to be as, that's what, I mean, there's of all the different conversations, some parts I would divulge, some parts I wouldn't. But on a very practical, simple level, it's bringing as many footballs into a gym as possible. There's no dead time. So if I'm lifting with you, Kevin, and we're in pairs, and we're just, scratching your head while you're lifting, just try to be as efficient as possible, having targets in the gym. Uh, Talking about, I've been a big proponent of this. You want, ideally, I want is in my gym, my utopian gym would be
Mm.
some lunatic walking through the gym with a gym bag, excuse me, with a tackle bag, banging off people. So that if they see you coming, they hold the ball with the other hand. But they're
Interesting.
always on call. Well, I mean, that's one thing I'd say about David Clifford. Guy from the year to next year, he carries the ball both hands
Mm.
before we even get to skill execution. And I think players have to be able to carry the ball in both hands. We can, when it comes to S&C, that's certainly something that I think players can do. You can even living mechanics at the start of sessions. Uh, Put the ball in both hands in drills um, in warm ups when they're out there doing, the stuff that you do.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you're talking like single hand, holding it in one hand. So obviously with the other hand, then you're holding off the players. So that's if you're coming down the left side, then you want to be able to hold it in your hand. Yeah.
That's probably leading in the gym. I would be a big proponent of those. Those ones.
Mm.
Um, there, but you're holding the ball with the other hand. For me mirroring and game situation there, you're holding off a player and you're holding the
Yeah.
ball and not on the hand.
So what was that exercise?
Jackhammer is what I call it.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's interesting. That's definitely something that I'll try and bring in. Like the risk here, Karol, is that the research papers can be quite dense, and when you put so
Mm.
much time into something, uh, there's a risk then that it's sitting on a shelf, and it's very hard for coaches to come across that, and for coaches to kind of know to decipher it really, and to know, right, okay,
Yeah.
this is what I can put into place. Like, do you think the GA should be doing more coming from the very top in terms of breaking this down for coaches and breaking this down for clubs and counties and development squads?
I couldn't agree more. Actually, it's funny, I didn't realize this. Morris Brosnan, I was spoken to him about this, not about my stuff, but he was talking very general about academic stuff in GA, or sorry, in sport. And is there essential resource for people like you who are interested in this stuff to be able to access it? And you're just scratching your head thinking, I'm not sure, I don't think there is. So I empathize an awful lot with that. So then with the coaches out there who want to develop certain things, not realize that this resource is out there. And that's very fair by them.
Mm.
And the GA are trying to address it. I know they're trying to get academics or researchers up to Crow Park once a year to get them into a room to discuss their research. Um, I I've found, yeah, I think the last 3 years or so they've been wrong. We've been doing that. And I know the GA webinar which we discussed there. Uh,
Mm.
it started in I mean, Shane Bang was in the first one after the periodization and you did it for. But in terms of maybe communicating this more for me, yes, I think it could be done more for me, especially when it's GA specific. Um, and yeah, making coaches. Do you know what I found coaches are They are hungry to find out what's out there. They are. Whether they agree with it or want to implement it maybe is a different matter, but they do want to find out what's there.
Mm.
But it is a very valid point to say that some of these academic papers are quite dense, and how do you expect a guy who's working a job to spend 2 to 3 hours going through that paper? So no, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Um, so that webinar you're talking about there, it's a 13-week series, and only 1 week is actually devoted to skill. So it does show there's probably a mismatch there in terms of the importance of a skill. Um, when you compare it to all the other aspects like around S&C and everything else, like there is probably a gap there in terms of how it's appreciated. Like I don't know if you listened to Kieran McGeeney being interviewed after Armagh lost to Kerry last weekend, and he was being asked about the 6-day turnaround and how difficult it was to come down to Kerry and to travel down and all that stuff. And he started talking about, well, we missed a lot of chances. We had X amount of ways we dropped these balls short, and that comes again back to the skill. And you can talk about being tired and being fatigued and all that, but if you're dropping balls short, if you're missing scoreable chances, and the opposition are getting more possessions and they're turning the ball over and they're able to go up the field and score, then it does come back to skill, even when it is S&C or physically. You can see a difference. It actually, ultimately, a lot of it comes down to skill. And if you're giving the ball away or you're missing chances, it doesn't matter how fit you are. If you're giving the ball back to the opposition, it comes
Yeah,
back.
so this is and with Tommy Rooney last year, and he very point to put this. He said skill can override fitness to a certain extent. If you can kick efficiently and catch efficiently, i.e., no double takes, triple takes, to collect the ball, collect it first time, and you kick the ball over the bar first time. Versus, again, let's just say you do that in 5 seconds. Let's say the first carry goal, the Graham Sullivan pass to Dylan Gailey to David Clifford.
Mm.
Look how efficient that is, and the lack of physical effort. I thought relative
Yeah.
to 2 to 3 minutes of constant loops and angle runs and recycling. I mean, look at how demanding the latter is versus the former. So, yeah, skills can override fitness to a certain extent. And I would agree with that. It's just about efficiency.
Yeah, and you even look at the two teams who were knocked out last weekend, like Donegal and Armagh, and they're two teams who religiously will run the ball. And James Dunny was saying it on this week's podcast on Off the Ball, that when you compare that, when you're talking about a whole season, you're talking about 6-7 months of running the ball. It does wear you down. Where a team like Kerry then, who really suit the new rules and they're able to kick the ball, they're going to be a lot fresher, and their bodies aren't being grinded down as much compared to a team like Armagh, who will just run the ball constantly.
Yeah, I just, we go back to the webinar and maybe there's a reason for it. I mean, I do know my two supervisors, Phil Carney and Ian Sherwin. Phil in particular, he will be big skill acquisition practitioner and researcher in Ireland and internationally. Um, he's outstanding in that regard. But in general, I was kind of wondering, why is there only 1 week on skill assessment or skill acquisition in general? Is there some good people out there? But I don't understand that. Again, maybe there's a good reason for it, but I don't understand that. Like, when you prioritize it, the benefits can be there in the long term. Uh, it's maybe clear McGinn and Jimmy again is who might have said, but maybe, maybe there were genuine reasons for this. Maybe they're playing according to the players they have. They feel that these are the areas they can improve on in the short to medium term. Maybe they feel that it's a far longer term to be able to develop players that can big pass efficiently and effectively and accurately. And I don't know, but it's to maintain that level of play is it's quite difficult over 2, 3, 4 years. But it goes back to my original point at the start of this conversation. Are we attributing the due importance to skill acquisition that we should be? For the absolute key facets of the game, the kick pass, both feet, and catching.
Mm.
And I don't think we should. It's like we're putting, by bringing in all these other areas which are important in their own right, are we kind of complicating matters? I by all means bring them in, but I would have thought we get the fundamentals right. I would say that is one thing they do well in Kerry, be it tradition, be it the club structure where there's just so many games for young children to play, so many competitions, and like that tradition of constantly walking down the street with a ball or being able to kick proficiently, it just seems to be there year after year, generation after generation. Um, and I always say that Kerry winning in Ireland or winning in Croke Park is worth hundreds and hundreds of hours of the GDA when it comes to the 8, 9, 10-year-old boy girl
Mm.
and their willingness to practice over the coming months.
Mm. We would have talked a lot about left-footed players the last time we spoke. Is that something you want to delve into a bit more in terms of your own research going forward from here?
Yeah, definitely. Because I feel like I would have touched on Ajax. They have a, a policy of having three left-sided players in each squad from under 14 upwards. Um, that would be for different reasons than Ireland. Because I feel I don't feel our research shows that left-footed players tend to be more bilateral. People want to talk the opposite, but the objective evidence shows the opposite, and that they are near bilateral. But for me, I would always recommend, as much as is possible or as is practical, left-sided players to be kept in the individual squad system.
Mm.
They're worth their weight in gold. Um, Again, if we go back to the tactical impact, if you see Audie Clifford from a Kerry viewpoint, if you see last year, the league was a brilliant example. If you had stopped the season in June, Paul Gaelic would have been on for an all-star. Stoney was injured for a lot of the league of last year. So when Paul is on the ball, he really brings 15 into play.
Mm.
And Paul was playing 15 last year by memory. So I think, as I say, I think left-footed players are worth their weight in gold in any team. Definitely. I think it's underestimated.
Mm. Just before we finish up, then, is there any other areas that you think you think it's important to talk about, or that you'd like to go into at all before we finish?
And I think the important research for us, for me, and it's why we'd be looking at the passing and how the dominant side influences passing of a team, influences their tactics. And then I do have a hypothesis. There's dominant foot dictates the side it's going, and it will tend to go on the same side in Gaelic football. And it's just a case for me of either proving or disproving that hypothesis with objective data. But I do know that, like, last year, I spoke to a guy that researching AFL, and before I brought it up, he brought it up to me, and I said, that's what I've been thinking over last year as well. So they're looking at that as well, and how the dominant side, dominant kid passing influences team tactics.
Mm.
So it's definitely an area I need to go to. And I know for that, I want to keep getting out. I suppose communicating this to the I suppose clubs, the counties. Maybe moving the dial, realizing that Rome wasn't built in a day. It is an area I'm quite passionate about, as you can gather.
Mm.
But I just want to maybe move the dial a little bit and maybe open up discussions, and I suppose open up discussions that what we're doing in the GA around the non-dominant side is, it's very ad hoc. It's very kind of make up as you go along, and there's a lack of coherent strategy from club to county. Cool. And if we can get that right, regardless of the county, if we can think more long term, if we can think beyond current coach, if we think long term in terms of the club's existence and the club's success and the Kerry success in 5, 6, 10 years' time, I think we'll be in a much better path. Because right now, if we keep the tokenistic attitude to we more or less have, it will remain, the status quo will remain. And we'll be looking at players constantly going to their dominant side and scratching their heads.
Mm. And like, do you think the game would be vastly improved if players were, if this improved by say 25% over the next 30 years? How much better would the game be to watch? Or what are the differences in terms of what we're looking at on the pitch as a product?
Oh my God, it'd be unrecognizable. It would just be so much, so many more. It's shoot shots at goal. And if there's more shots at goal, there will almost inevitably be more scoring. Just the pitch would be opened up. Currently, we're playing with half a pitch,
Mm.
and we're constantly kicking the ball into 13 and going back in towards the middle. And so if we can open up the pitch between players, suddenly it becomes a small number. If we can open up the pitch and shoot more, there'll be more goals. If we're using on times more, it will release plays. It will release create more goal chances. It just more scores, more exciting, more skillful, happier. You know, like I couldn't recommend it enough as to why it, I for the benefits of it. But ultimately that's up to supporters.
Mm.
And maybe,
Just
yeah, sorry, one no.
sorry, go on, finish your point there.
No. Maybe you're going to say maybe deterrence because I think maybe easy for a former on the player or prominent club player to extol the values of this to their children. You need to be able to develop your main dominant side. I suppose what we need to communicate this to is the parent who doesn't have a sporting background. And we sow the seeds in their lives as to the value of this for their children. And when they go to back, that, they'll be, I bet you can do this 20 times with their non-dominant foot in a fun way.
Mm.
And, there'll be a fun size Mars bar at the end of it, something fun like that. It's for them as well.
Mm. Just I know you're coaching with the Legion. How much does this come into your thought process when you're designing sessions or drills or just thinking about the team as a whole? Is this all encompassing in terms of, you can't get away from it? Like you have so much knowledge in this area, you've done so much research. Are you constantly thinking about bilaterality or developing non-dominant side when you're putting together sessions or when you're coaching players?
Really good question, actually, because I think if you're in there longer term, and possibly so, but what you're doing really is um, there is definitely one pattern of plays I've shown in video and we've gone after in sessions and which I've taught them to look out for. And it's definitely something that you're nailing, guys, for want of a better word again, and they don't see it. And it's all raising their awareness. So that's definitely one thing. But I have to say with them that there's some really good lads there, not just your county players. Um, they're they all know the value of developing an on-down side, both in hands and feet. Like, if you take Brian Kelly there, I see 35, 36, like he's still hungry to develop his dominant foot off the tee. You know, whereas maybe when he started his county career, that wouldn't have been a value, or sorry, something that was of great benefit or seen as a great benefit. But he's constantly out there. And you look at those lads and you say, well, it's no accident that they have had the careers they've had. And he's, they're out there trying to develop a non-dominant hand. And again, I saw him one night in Australia. He was jammed in. And I thought, oh, he's jammed in here now. And then he pulls out his non-dominant left hand to hand pass. Otherwise, he was going to get done for overcarrying. So I suppose with these guys, they're self-driven. Culturally, the culture is there before them. But yeah, there's definitely one or two areas, Kevin, where I'd bought, and I think we can take advantage of, and it's just showing them that, both in, I suppose, video and in games. But I will say one thing: you don't want, because I've come to the other side of this, and because I'm so aware of it, I can't let it control me either.
Mm.
because there was a time maybe 3 4 years ago where it was just be all and end all, and like, okay, it's important in real years in my view, but I also have to take the view that there's other areas that we need to work on as well. Like, I can't then try and drive them out of their mind, so it's finding that balance. I'd agree with that. Like,
Yeah, and like just in the context of the new rules, it is probably more important having that. Like you're talking about keepers there, like
mm,
because of now the kickouts have to go beyond
yeah,
the big arc, and there's so much value in the keeper. If a keeper can stand and not give away by his body position, traditionally if a keeper was going to his non-dominant side, he'd have to wind around, and it'd be very obvious to a team that he's going there. Whereas now, a lot of goalkeepers, even at intercounty level, they can stand straight and you don't know if they're going to go left or right. And
yeah.
that's probably one of the areas now there's huge value in keepers developing that side because they can clip it to the corner back without giving away to the opposition.
And I've heard in like certain development squads, and I think this is right. That is it's one of the first things they look for in under 14 keepers.
Mm.
That ability, or at least willingness, to be able to pop it up with their left, if that's their non-dominant foot, with the corner back. Um, Because as you said, those days are like being one-footed, and the whole Stevie Wonder knows what side the ball is coming
Mm.
to. Those days are gone. It just won't cause anymore, nor should it. Um, so yeah, I think you're, yeah, and this is important for every positioning pitch. I mean, maybe traditionally people would have said, "Oh, you're a midfielder, you're centre forward, and you're inside forwards." But as I said there, even your goalkeeper, it might be one in 5 matches where he has to use his non-dominant hand. But is
Mm.
he able to use it in that instance? The cornerback, same thing. If he's pinned in, look at Kieran Kilkenny. Everyone is talking about Kieran Kilkenny. That incident. I mean, what a player! How he got out of that situation on Sunday.
In the corner with two Donegal
I mean,
players.
Jesus,
Yeah.
what a player! But in that situation, I mean, maybe if that was a cornerback and he has to use his non-dominant hand for a hop or hand pass once in 5 games, otherwise it's a goal. There's the value of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and probably with 2 pointers as well now, you'll see like if a player, I'm not saying it's easy, but if you know a player is only going to shoot off 1 foot on the 2 point arc, it's so much more difficult than a Shane Walsh the last minute of a game, and he'd go either side and clip a two. The value in a player actually being able to kick from distance off his non-dominant side as well is only going to.
Like my Foley there, the times he was saying, like, he replied to a tweet. I was talking about the Dubs cutting back in, and he said he agreed, and he said if you look at Kerry versus Armagh yesterday, he said when in the first half when Kerry were standing off Armagh, they weren't standing off them being very passive. They were deliberately putting them onto their non-dominant foot.
Mm.
So that was one reason why Armagh were constantly recycling as well. But maybe this should have been at the very start of the conversation, Kevin.
Yeah.
Let's say this to coaches. What is the first thing you will say to a young fella? If Johnny, who has scored 8 points off you the previous month, what is the first thing you will say to him if Paul's going marking him tonight? You'll say he's right or left foot. Right? And when you strip it back like that, and that goes to intercounty, you'll say he's right hand dominant for the half pass, or he's right foot dominant for the kick pass. The first thing we will say, then we'll go into the nuances of how they play.
Mm.
But how much work do we do in it? As I say to the coaches, I've said this in a county level, if you're saying it about them, they're saying it about you. So what are you doing to improve your side?
Mm.
Oh, yeah, I mean, again, the Kerry Armagh thing, it looked like they were being passive, but they were quite deliberate. They were constantly putting their moment to their non-dominant side.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I hadn't noticed that. Yeah, Carl, look, it's been a really interesting hour. We could probably go on for another hour
Yeah.
talking about different examples and diving into the research. But yeah, you're after doing serious work in this area. So I hope this kind of work eventually does go mainstream in the GA and it becomes an area just as important as S&C and psychology and all that sort of stuff, because we probably don't even realize, like you talked about there, how much the game will actually improve, if we were able to really bring this in on a national level. But yeah, fair play for all that, and you can relax for a while anyway, having finished that PhD. I'm sure it's a massive workload. So thanks a million for coming on again. Really appreciate it.